Hey everyone, I just wanted to do a quick Fire King Volcanic deck profile because I think the deck is really interesting. I kind of threw it together for locals yesterday, and I went 4-1, which is a pretty respectable record. I played against Labyrinth, Vanquish Soul, Tearlament, Unchained, and Sky Striker, which was a decent little slate of matchups. The loss was in time against Labyrinth. I should have scooped, but I didn't. And I would have won in time with all my Volcanic cards in Game 3, but it is what it is. So let's hop right into it. Starting off, we have 3 Fire King Kieran, the best Fire King monster, the hand trap, the goat, as it were. One of the best monsters in the deck. 3 copies of Legendary Fire King Ponix, the actual boss monster of the deck. He's a +1 every single turn, sometimes a +2, sometimes a +3. Absolutely crazy. The most mandatory consistency piece in the whole deck, and you want to see it every game, even above any Volcanic stuff. 3 copies of Sacred Fire King Garunix. I don't know if you need 3 going forward. Maybe I would shave it to 2 because you have a really big other engine to back you up. But what I really like about Garunix is that if you only have Volcanic stuff, you can access big Garunix through the Volcanic stuff even on your opponent's turn if they kill it, and then he can still be an interruption, which is cool. Then we have some 1 of Fire Kings. I have 1 of the Fire King High Avatar Garunix. I like this card. I think it's actually necessary because it allows Sacred Fire King to pop, the biggest Fire King Garunix to pop the mediumest Fire King Garunix and gain up to 4,050 attack, which is really huge. 1 copy of Fire King Avatar Rangbali, just the spell and trap negate. 1 copy of Fire King Avatar Arvada, which is the monster negate, and also an important floater for the deck. 1 copy of Fire King Avatar Barong, which is the searcher. You need to use it to search Kieran almost all the time to have the standard M board. And finally, 1 copy of Fire King Avatar Kieran, the baby Kieran. Baby Kieran is the bridge that brings Fire Kings and Volcanics together outside of the Diabellestar engine, because Baby Kieran allows you to Foolish Burial any fire monster when it's destroyed. Then we have the Fire King spells, 3 copies of Fire King Sanctuary, absolutely mandatory. Sanctuary is Island, Island is combo, and this is definitely the best card for it. I am also running 3 copies of Fire King Island because in 60 cards I just want to see Island as often as possible. And finally the 1 terraforming, so I've got 7 islands, 10 islands with the Ponix, 11 islands with the 1-for-1, etc. You should see Island pretty much every game. And I have 1 copy of Fire King Skyburn as a searchable interruption or like a board breaker, and 1 copy of Circle of the Fire King so that you can just kill your opponent on follow-up. This deck absolutely kills people into the sun on turn 2 if they don't really interrupt you. That's it for the Fire King portion of the deck. Now we'll move on to the Volcanics. We have 3 copies of Volcanic Trooper, just the normal summon that searches any Volcanic card, very important, and also part of the 1-card combo to get Emperor plus Inferno, where you can discard to give your opponent a bomb token, pop the bomb token with the Volcanic Blaze Accelerator, etc. 3 copies of Volcanic Scattershot, which is the mandatory card for this build. The reason that I really like this build actually is the access to an extra Raigeki effect on your opponent's turn, as well as a lot of burn damage to win in time. Definitely my favorite Volcanic card alongside the trap. 2 copies of Volcanic Rocket. Rocket can be used to add a Blaze Accelerator card from deck or graveyard to hand. It gives you access to the Blaze Accelerator reload, which is huge because that is how you access Scattershot in your opponent's turn and is probably the best trap in the deck. I'm running 2 copies of Volcanic Rimfire. You want to dump 1 to dump any Volcanic, usually Emperor, and then you want to dump another to trade out a Volcanic Blaze Accelerator for another one or for a Blaze Accelerator reload. And it's a level 1 fire, you might notice. We have 3 copies of Volcanic Shell. It's a level 1 fire, and it provides infinite ammunition for Blaze Accelerators and for Diabellestar cards, and is just a generally great card. And there's 1 copy of Volcanic Emperor. This guy is awesome. 3,100 attack, super easy to summon, burns for a ton, kills your opponent, searches the trap. Probably one of the most powerful custom card bosses ever made. Really love Volcanic Emperor. Then we have 1 copy of Volcanic Inferno. You can search it off of Emperor and use it as a negate if you banish a Volcanic monster from your graveyard. It's kind of decent, and it lets you put back Scattershots slowly to nuke your opponent's board again, in a pinch, but that's for super grind games, and you're usually killing your opponent dead. 3 copies of Volcanic Blaze Accelerator. This is a custom card. You activate it, and you can special summon any Volcanic from the hand. You have to dump an OG Blaze Accelerator, which isn't an amazing card, but is a good card. I actually used it to clear out a board by sending 3 shells in a row, which is cool. It's not once per turn for the effect. You just have to have a Pyro monster with 500 or less attack in your hand, and shell adds itself every time, so that's cool. But Volcanic Blaze Accelerator is amazing. You can send any level 1 Pyro, which through Rimfire means any Volcanic, and you can destroy cards your opponent controls, and you can special summon from hand, and it's just all around an amazing card. Then we have 2 copies of Blaze Accelerator Reload. This is the trap card that allows you to send Scattershot from deck to graveyard on your opponent's turn. really great, and I used it a few times to get draws, which is also cool. You usually place one face up with Rimfire if you don't have access to it at all and you have a scatter shot in your hand. Otherwise, you just put one in the graveyard by any means, and it's a Raigeki for your opponent's turn that burns for 1500. Speaking of putting Blaze Accelerator Reload into the graveyard by any means necessary, got 3 copies of Foolish Burial Goods, which in this deck functions just as a quick play Raigeki. You Burial Goods the reload, you reload at any point to shoot your opponent with 1500 damage, and Scattershot Raigeki their board. The final piece that's like a Volcanic card is 1 copy of Fire Recovery. You can send it off Foolish Burial Goods to shuffle back Scattershots and get a draw, or shuffle back any fires and get a draw, really. And it's kind of a Monster Reborn, but that's not usually how I use it. Usually it's just to shuffle back Scattershots, get the draw, and nuke them again. And last but certainly not least, we have the engine that glues both of these decks together very well. 3 copies of Wanted Poster, which allows you to search for your 3 copies of Diabellestar. Combined, these 6 cards represent 6 copies of original Sinful Spoil Snake Eye, which is actually 7 copies of that card, which is 7 more copies of Ponix, 7 more copies of Rimfire, 7 more copies of Shell, etc. This engine accesses either engine very well. It also gives you a nice beat stick sometimes, gives you some draws. It lets you put reloads and shells into the graveyard, has a lot of synergy. Then we are running 1 copy of Sinful Spoils of Subversion Snake Eye. This is just a card that you can set off Diabellestar to remove a monster that can't be destroyed by card effect, which this deck otherwise has a little bit of trouble with. And finally, we have some power 1-ofs. We got 1 for 1, which summons, again, either half of the deck as needed. Pot of Extravagance. You don't really need the extra deck too much. It's nice to have, but it's not mandatory. And if you happen to draw Extravagance, Pot agreed. The first copy is the best copy, after all. 1 copy of Hita the Fire Channeler. Again, a once per turn searcher for fire monsters. You don't use non-fires too often. And this one can be nice because you can discard a Shell to search a Ponix, discard a Ponix to search an Emperor. I mean, there's all kinds of things you can do with this. And finally, 1 copy of Blaster Dragon, Ruler of Infernos. Not necessarily the best card, but I really like him. I like that you can use him to banish 2 more Pyros from the graveyard to burn your opponents. I use that to summon an Emperor with 5 banished Pyros very easily, and then just burn your opponent for 2500 out of nowhere. His pop effect in hand is okay. You can discard Shell for it, but really he's just a nice extender you can get for free that you can discard off of all your various effects. That's it for the main deck. Getting into the extra deck, we once again have 3 copies of Garunix Eternity Hang of the Fire Kings. Definitely the best card in the deck. I only made it more than once in a game one time. You don't need all 3 copies, but a cool synergy is that Emperor is a level 8, so you can overlay with it on your turn to nuke the board. 1 copy of Starflare Typhon. Definitely great just to have non-destruction removal access. 1 copy of Underworld Goddess to out-towers monsters. 1 copy of Doolittle Chimera to pump up the Sacred Fire King past 4,550, which is huge. A Pit Knight early, which I tested out, and I don't think I like very much, but it does have some use if you have a lot of free bodies lying around. 1 copy of Heat of the Fire Charmer Ablaze. Everyone's running fire decks right now. 1 copy of Sunlight Wolf to add stuff back. I actually did use that. It was pretty nice to add back a Kieran. 1 Firefighting Drumadal for spell trap removal that kind of floats a little bit, sort of. 1 Nightmare Unicorn. It's a discard outlet for some of your Volcanic stuff, and it's also non-destruction removal. 1 IP Masquerena, and 1 SP Little Knight. These go together very well. Theoretically, IP and Pit Knight early go together extremely well too, but I never had enough bodies to make IP plus Pit Knight plus another body. Then we have 1 copy of Salamander Almirage and 1 copy of Relinquished Anima, just for a fire normal summon link 1 and a removal that is non-destruction normal summon link 1. And finally, I don't usually go over side decks too in depth, but I do side 1 copy of Kurikara Div Incarnate because you can search it off of original Sinful Spoils, 1 copy of Barrier Statue of the Inferno because you can sometimes FTK people with it, and 1 copy of Volcanic Queen because it can be searched off of Volcanic Trooper and then out your Pearly Noir or other Towers monsters in a pinch. So that's it for the deck profile. Hope you liked it. 60 card Volcanic Fire King Diabellestar was a really fun time. Very powerful, breaking boards, but I don't think it was consistent enough to merit bringing to a huge tournament. Maybe with a little work I could get it down into the mid-40s, maybe mid-high 40s even. And that might be a little bit more consistent, while probably still won't have room for hand traps, but it would just be a little bit stronger at doing the Volcanic plays. But overall, this deck kills people into the sun and is super fun when it goes off, so would strongly recommend taking it to your next locals. That's all. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you next time.